Hi, and welcome to Homo Ludens, the channel on history and board games.
I'm Alexandre.
And I'm Fred.
It's funny every time. It feels fun.
Yeah, it does feel weird. But we're back once again. So we actually managed to. Alex lives in France now. That's why why we're making.
I moved in Fred's attic, and in the morning he wakes me up and he's like, "You need to play some more games. We need to play
make another
more
video.
games. We make more videos." Yeah.
And today we're going to talk about Prelude to Revolution, that was released by Compass Game, I believe, in 2023.
I think that's right.
Based on the system by Marco Poutré and the designer. It's a designer from New York, Mike Willner.
Absolutely.
And I believe that he's actually a friend of one of our fellow members.
I think he's in the same gaming club as Timothy.
Exactly, from what I've heard.
Yeah.
That shouldn't taint our opinion on this game too much, because we hate Timothy. So.
Yeah, he's such a mean-spirited human being.
So that's the first thing, and we hate Compass. That's true. So that should. And they
shots fired.
And they didn't send a review copy, obviously, because it's Compass, and the concept is beyond their comprehension. But yeah, I found this copy actually at a convention in the UK for a very cheap price. I got it because, as some people know, I'm always on the search for the perfect or the ideal game about the Russian Revolution. And this one is exactly on this topic. It's actually covering the period 1905 to 1917, so the beginning of the Troubles, the creation of the Duma, up to the October Revolution. So quite a large scope, and we'll talk about this when we do the criticism. But before talking about all this, I think it would be interesting maybe to have, from your perspective, what the system is about, because it is a system.
Yeah, it is, and it's even the Prelude 2 series at this point, because as you said, it's the development is done by a Québécois designer, Marco Poutré, and Marco actually did the Prelude to Rebellion a couple of years ago, which is a game about the obscure topic of the Révolte des Patriotes in Lower Canada, which I think explains why there aren't that many people who know of this series. I mean, it's an obscure topic. In Quebec, it is an important part of our history, but even in the larger context of Canada, English Canada doesn't know much about the Patriot Revolution, or they don't care about it, or they have their own feelings about it. And so, I think it was a bold move on the part of Compass to launch to actually release a game about such an obscure topic. Yeah. And you made a crack about Compass, but it's the sort of game that only can exist in the weird chaos of Compass's anything goes publishing Eto. So there's some good in there.
But the thing about Prelude to Rebellion that I haven't played is that I've talked to a few people, not a lot of people played it.
Yeah. But it's good.
Everyone who played it,
it's so good.
Yeah, said it was brilliant. And this is also one of the reasons why I was so curious about this one, is that, well, it's hard to find Prelude to Rebellion in Europe, because not a lot of people bought it.
I think it has to be one of the lowest selling games in Compass's catalog, because they're always selling it for cheap, and get it. It's really good. And I think that the game has a bad reputation, because if you look at it, it basically looks like a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
An Excel spreadsheet with some weird thermometers.
Yeah.
And when you have the game in front of you, it's actually quite interesting, and it plays well, and those maps are done by they're nice. They're nicer.
Okay.
They're better than in front of you. They look better than when you take a picture of them.
This I would agree. I saw a lot of pictures of Prelude to Rebellion. I saw a lot of pictures of Prelude to Revolution, and my impression was, first of all, when I had it in front of me, it looked better than what it looked in pictures. Yeah. That's true. And the other thing, and I think this is the point that you're raising, is that when you're engaging with the game and all of the different things click, and you understand the dynamic, and you understand why the game looks the way it looks, once you're in it, it goes beyond. It doesn't matter too much, and it's like the experience is greater than how it looks.
And there are some things that couldn't be done in other ways, so it's like the best graphical solution probably to what the game is trying to achieve. And
it could be better.
For sure. But it's
makes
still
sense.
Absolutely. And so one of the interesting things about the design is that you're trying to get control of spaces, zones, but it's not like a generic value. Like there, these little thermometers, they all have like different values. Some thermometers, like competing thermometers, don't cap at the same level, which means that one of the factions has an edge in the end game. It can always, like, even if you're the best at the beginning, the other faction can just like
and there is nothing that you can do about it.
That's it. Like it's just that space is more sympathetic to one side than it is to the other. And in the context of Prelude to Rebellion, which is more, I mean, Prelude to Revolution is a political game, but Prelude to Rebellion was a game about like mobilization and elections. It made so much sense because it really felt like a detailed representation of like an election and trying to gain influence in the context of an election.
And it's true that when I was playing this one, Prelude to Revolution, I could see how the system fits very well with an electoral game. And we'll talk about the criticism I have about this specific entry in the series, but it made me really want to play Prelude to Rebellion and potentially see the Prelude to system being applied to other elections.
For sure.
Because I think it would be really interesting, because I think in terms of modeling electoral dynamics, I think it is really interesting, this idea of the thermometer and the fact that you have an asymmetry in the spaces that you can control and how you're going to control them.
And even you have a catch-up mechanism, which is like very, very clever. It doesn't nullify those benefits, but it sort of tampers them. And we need to talk about the scoring system, because I think it's really one of the main interesting points of it is perfect in the sense that you have some control over the scoring, but it's always
slightly random.
Slightly random. And it's that so you have these 4 scoring tracks. So you have districts, organizations, world affairs,
and the Duma.
And at the end of each card, which you play, on the upper left corner, you have a dice, and so you're going to roll this dice, and so one of them is the world affairs dice, one of them is the district dice, etc. But so you have, on each dice you have like 3 chances that the main issue is going to be the one that advances towards scoring, and then you have one other side for each of the others. So even though you're rolling the world affair dice, you might roll organization, and so sometimes you want to score these things, and that it's so good. I
love the fact that you're not fully in control.
But you are still
influence. But you don't have full control.
And it's to me it's like and each of these, there are some moments where it's just like, I really just need to score the world affairs now, because you're probably going to shift them towards you, or same thing for the organizations and districts. And sometimes it goes your way, and you're just like, I just made a double whammy. This is great. And then sometimes it doesn't work, and you're at peace with that, because you still made the best possible decision. And then there was an outside chance that it didn't work, and that's what happened. And it's a nice balance, I feel.
I agree that this is, for me, one of the highlights and one of the differences this game goes, because I think it brings a lot of ideas to the traditional CDPs. And this is one of the things that I'm impressed by when I'm looking at the system, is that it takes a lot of things that we're familiar with, but then it twists them in interesting manners, and it refreshes the idea of a political CDP. The other thing that for me was amazing and made me think a lot was the system of opportunity.
It's really good.
This is really good. Basically, when you're going to be playing an event from your opponent, if this event doesn't work at that time for your opponent, it's going to become an opportunity for them. It's going to give them opportunity points, up to half of the operation points. But that means that this card is not going to disappear. It's going to be there. And then it's going to be the other side, the other player's choice to decide when to spend that opportunity, when to activate it. And the thing is that the opportunity...
And you also get more opportunity cards at the beginning of every turn, which are like sort of like open face
assets
that you have. And there are some key events in there.
And it gives you a weird approach to hand management, because it means that you have the events in your hand, but then you have the neutral events that are opportunities. You have your own opportunity event. and it gives you a sort of flexibility, and it's really interesting because you can also see what the other might trigger. It gives a bit this idea of a market that I really like. For example, in a game like Wir sind das Volk, it's not the same mechanic, but it gives the same dynamic, and I find it really interesting. I really like about this. And if you add on top of this the fact that each faction have specific assets at the beginning of the game, you can play also some of your action points to do special powers once in a game round.
And they're interesting, and like you have such a large menu of options.
The decision space is really interesting.
And even we talked about opportunity points in the context of the opportunity pool. But you can also use these points in order to for your checks. And sometimes that's how you're going to use those points. You're not going to be playing those cards. You're just going to be creating organizations in tougher spots through the use of opportunity points. And I think that's it's a very interesting currency. There is a very interesting economical sub-mechanic around the opportunity that I find that I've never really seen in other game, and for me those additions to the system makes it like really its own system, but at the same time extremely familiar to anyone who's played a card-driven game before. And I think that's great. Absolutely.
And for me, that's a great system that I hope will be developed more in the future. I want to see more games in it. And like talking about the system and the differences with CDGs, for me, I think that's
but it's interesting because I think I would never suggest that as your first CDG because a lot of the mechanics are familiar if you've played other CDGs, but it adds some stuff on top. But it's not overwhelming. Like after a game turn, you're probably familiar with what your options are. And I think it just gives you, the game is a little less on rails. And we haven't even talked about the decks yet, which are really well seeded, I think, in order to tell that narrative, even though you have some reservations about the length of the game itself.
If we keep talking about the system itself, the fact that you have eras, and for each eras you have specific decks. But this comes from
that's not a new idea.
This is not a new idea. Like that's from almost the origins of card games. It has been in. It was in Path of Glory. It was in Twilight Struggle. Like it was already there. The thing that I really liked that not that many games do, and I would have liked that this one made more, is that depending on some key points of decision, you might have new cards that enter the deck and some cards that are removed. And this I like, the fact that you have a pivotal moment that happens that might or might not happen, and if it happens, like the shape of the deck changes. In this case, it's only during the collapse. You might have a provisional government that appears, and it is limited, but it's there, and I appreciate it. But I think if we cover the system, I think the system as a whole, quite different. I would agree. Not an intro CDG, but not overwhelming. If you've played a CDG before, you're going to be completely fine. And the wealth of decision that it gives you is a lot, but for me it's the right balance. Like you're like, okay, I have a lot of things to think about, but it's not overwhelming, and everything makes sense.
For sure.
So it's very obvious. Now, talking about this game specifically, the original one was an electoral game, which made a lot of sense.
For sure. I feel, as I was playing this, I was like, this is a great game. I love this system, and I love this topic, and I think it treats it fairly. It's not like a bad treatment of the subject, but you do feel that the system was designed for
something
else, and that this is a bit pasted on. And I think it's a question of scale. It's a question of time length. But there is a thing where it's like, even though the idea of a revolutionary thermometer amuses me, it's not quite as flavorful as when you apply it to an election. And there are some slight modifications. For example, the Duma system is a little more detailed than the difference between urban and rural counties in Prelude to Rebellion. And there is also a little bit of an adjacency system, which is also related to the Duma because you need to create some political organizations in order to start building organizations in some sectors of the map, and these sectors of the maps are sometimes linked to like specific regions and areas, and I think they're supposed to represent like people living in these areas, probably work in these areas. So there are some attempts at making it like
adapting the system to the topic,
but they're not completely successful, and I think it feels a bit pasted on.
Yeah. Just to be fair to Mike Willner, I think the job that has been done to actually paste that theme on top of the system
really good.
Is really good.
It's the best pasting on of the theme you could do with that.
And it's not lazy at all. Like some people, when you say, "Oh, it feels like the theme was pasted on," it might have that impression that it was
not like in the Euro sense of like that the theme is pasted on. It's
like you can see that Mike worked. Yeah, like for you, the work that has been done in the deck, like the deck is very rich. It tells a very interesting, not comprehensive because it is impossible to be comprehensive for a topic like this, but a very rich and detailed history of the Russian Revolution starting from 1905. I think it's like I really enjoyed playing this. Like it was very rich. I could see a lot of things that are recognized, and I was like, oh, he thought about this. This is really cool. Yeah. I think in the Duma, the radicalization system is quite
very clever.
So it is,
and even like. I think that as the revolutionary side, the way that you think about like creating this sort of like optimal situation and then you strike is really thematic. And it's when I'm saying pasted on, I mean it in the
and I know that you mean it this way. I just want to clarify for people
exactly.
watching.
But I think that like the asymmetry is something that we haven't even mentioned. But I think that the two sides feel different, and I'd be curious to play the game
from the other perspective
because I think I would see the whole narrative in a whole other light. And we haven't even mentioned the Tsar, which Fred tried to give the country to.
No, but the thing is that the Tsar, and this is really interesting.
I didn't know you were a Tsarist at heart.
It depicts the vibe around the Tsar very well in the sense that as the conservatives, I would say, and I will make a point after that.
He would say. I think this crown belongs to you. Need to.
I used the Tsar as an asset, and I needed the Tsar to be really strong at some point. And as soon as he was useless to me, I was the one who said, "Well, you had a good run. Now you're gonna fuck off. We're gonna take charge."
And on the other side of that track is me. Preparing for the October Revolution, but at the beginning of the game, you have a much stronger military force, and you score more VPs if the October Revolution explodes at a moment where I haven't prepared for it. And that's also really interesting. And that's something that you also have in Prelude to Rebellion. If the Patriot Rebellion explodes before you've prepared for it, you're going to get crushed by the English. And the English is sort of like trying to make it so that like the tension becomes unsustainable, it blows up before you've had the time to prepare, and all of those questions are interesting.
Yeah, and now I think I will go into the criticism because like you might have realized that I had a struggle to actually name what my faction was.
Yeah,
and that's for me one of the problems. The topic of the Russian Revolution is very complex because it is multifactional. And in this game it is distilled to two undistinct factions, like something that is more, and it's unclear who you're playing. Like I felt like I was playing a vibe, you know. And my vibe was conservative.
My vibe was
more left leaning. And it was a bit unclear, and you're like, already this is weird, and you don't have much in the way of portraying the internal tensions. You have the radicalization role in the Duma,
which is well done.
It's well done, but it doesn't.
It's the question of who you are as a player. I think at the it's a bit of a passing of the
exactly.
Because at the beginning I was sort of playing as like a socialist trying to like get some social movement starting, and then at some point I just radicalize.
Yeah, but it is unclear who you're playing. And this for me was like it was hard to stay in the suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
In the sense that. Like I had a hard time connecting who I was supposed to be in the game. For me, games like this are also a role-playing experience. My role was a bit unclear. So that's the first thing. And I feel like the internal tensions of each side were not as strong, like as you would expect them to be represented.
Yeah.
The other thing that I have, and that's my main criticism of that specific entry in the game, is that for me there is a dissonance between the geographical scope and the
time scale.
And the time scale. For me, if you're starting in 1905, it is weird that if you do 1905 to 1917, it is weird to focus on St. Petersburg, which is what the game is doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would understand it if it was starting from the beginning of the Great War up to October 17. That would make sense. And when I'm looking at this, it feels like, and this is where I would have liked that the game took a bit of distance from its predecessor, because the predecessor has 3 eras, 2 turns for the first era, 2 turns for the second era, 3 turns for the last era. And I was like, you know what, those first 2 turns, if you remove them, and you focused on the Great War, the collapse, you will have a game that is more, I would say more effective, telling a more interesting story. And
you could easily make a scenario where like the first 2 turns you can do the prelude, and also if you want to skip that, there's like you put some legitimate influence, and some coherent, and then you start from that moment, and then it becomes more coherent. It makes for like, I really enjoy playing the game. I don't think it overstays its welcome in terms of like, I've had fun until the end, but I do feel that the beginning is a little slow. And if it were just like an hour shorter, we would be playing this a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this is a game that we could be like, it could be one of my go-to games if it wasn't like a 3.5, 4 hour game.
And I think it's too long for what it is. And the fact that it's so frustrating is that it's too long for what it is, because it includes something that doesn't need to be in there. And you're like, oh my god, it's too bad, because if you remove this, the game is suddenly almost an hour shorter, maybe a bit more, and it's suddenly a 2.5 hour game, something like this. And
you might even deal with some of the historical issues you have with the game.
Yeah, and it removes the historical issues that I have with the discrepancy of the scope. Well, the factions would always be weird, but it's always hard in a game like this to do it, so I wouldn't give it too much criticism for it. But all of it would have been a more appealing package. And it's a bit of a frustration, and for me this is where it tried to stick too much
I think it might have
to the original game, and that could have been just a small change that wouldn't have changed the system, but that would have make it fit
and would have made it a more different game, which means that like you're like, oh, do I want to play Prelude to Rebellion? Do I want to play Prelude to Revolution? At this point, I think you can play either game, and you're basically gonna get the same experience, and you should just go on the topic. And sadly, people are going to go for the fancy bells and lights instead of the fascinating and underplayed topic of Lower Canada Rebellion, but that's another issue I have. I mean, get curious.
That's your cross
war gamers, be curious. You say you enjoy undergame topics.
This is it.
Now do I have an undergame topic for you?
Yeah. But anyway. I think for conclusions, I would say, for me, it was a great surprise. I was really happy to have bought it at a convention just on a whim. That was really, really cool. It will stay in my collection. I still want to do this series where I go through all of the games that I have about this specific topic, comparing them. And for me, it's a solid game on the Revolution. It's not ideal. There is a lot of issues with it, but it's the nature of that event. And I think it's really interesting to see the different perspective from the different designer. I think that the work that has been done by the designer on this one is really good.
Absolutely.
It's just that I would, but then again, I think it's his first design. It can be really hard to, it's your first design. You say, oh, I base it on a system. The system designer is my developer. Maybe it's hard to get to that point where you're making taking a stand to make a strong difference.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't.
But it feels finely tuned.
Yeah, it's hard
it
for
feels
me
well developed.
It's hard for me to criticize the design work. It's just that if there were ever a second edition, please consider this. And I'm happy to be part of the playtesters. I want to be part of it because I think there is something to be done here to make the game more distinct and could be more and could make it more interesting. In my opinion, I might be wrong, but I think it's at least worth a try.
And then there's also the idea of like, if you were to make another game in that system, what topic would you find? What difference would you make? Maybe even a smaller map would be a possibility. I don't know, but I mean, but there is a lot to do with that system. I think it's distinct enough from other CDGs for it to be like an actual like option if you're a designer to be like, I think I want to do something based on that system because it has some great ideas, starting with those dice.
And it's a system that I want to see expanded. Like I was so impressed by it that I want to see it expanded. And it comes to one of my last issues with the game, and that's the publisher. And
life is life, you know.
And the problem that I have with Compass is that I don't see them as a publishing company. I see them as a crowdsourcing. Like they're almost a self-publishing company. Like they don't have any editorial work. They don't put in any, from what we see, any specific work in making sure and ensuring the quality control of anything. Some of their printing is completely messy.
Some games go into the market, they're broken. So as a gamer, you're never sure what you're getting from the.
When you
I'm not anti-Compass. I'm like,
no, me neither.
but you need to be informed, and then you know that the game isn't going to be marketed in the way that it might deserve to be marketed.
Exactly.
And that's a bit of a shame because I think that they do publish some good games, but they don't even make the differences between the good and the bad games that they publish. They just publish. And
that's the problem that I have, is that when I see something like this, I'm seeing like an untapped or a hidden treasure. And the problem is that I think what goes in the way of that hidden treasure being found is this logo on the box. Like it makes it like it's a topic that you don't know anything about, from a designer that you don't know, published by a publisher that you know you cannot trust. And it's like it's a very hard sell. And if I hadn't find that thing saying, oh, I'm interested in the topic, I don't have to give money directly to companies.
And people were like, oh, Prelude to Rebellion is good, so you already knew that the base system had a bit of a reputation.
So much things that required for me to get this game. And now I'm like, well, it would really be, and it's maybe a call to publishers, you know, don't let Compass have the responsibility of this. They did the job. They let someone release a couple of games that are super interesting. Now it's time for another publisher that is actually doing some publishing to step up, take it, make it an actual series, and go with it.
And then I will say,
and credit where credit is due. They let great games being released,
and also
by accident.
By accident. But also they'll be like, they don't care enough. They'll be like, you have a game on the Patriot Revolution in Lower Canada? Sure, let's do it. Other publishers with a more strict plan would have just said like, what is this topic? I'm not even touching it. And there are some odd little games that come through Compass that I don't think other publishers would have dared to do. I mean, I think of a game like No Motherland Without by Dan Bullock. I think that other publishers would have been like, I'm not touching this. And it's an amazing game. And it's a shame that these really wild ideas.
But it is a perfect example because No Motherland Without is an excellent game, but it deserved a better publisher, because what they did, they published shitty counters instead of having the proper pieces in the box. They didn't do any proper art. They published the playtest art, and it's like, it's so sad. You got a brilliant
game,
and you didn't do anything with it. So that would be my conclusion.
But all in all, Prelude to Revolution, Prelude to Rebellion, get them and enjoy them.
Yeah, definitely. And hope we'll talk about the system more in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you should do something about Prelude to Rebellion at some point.
I will send an email to Marco Poutré.
It's a great game.
Yes, I will. Thanks. Bye-bye.